she is.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hello, Anne.
Hi.
See you both.
Very nice to
Yes.
see
It's
you.
very nice to see you.
I
Ah,
like the window, the Chartres window behind you. Very
You.
you recognize it. Chartres, yes.
just about, yes. Anyway, I'm very impressed that you got my book and that presumably you read it. My memory is going, so I've already forgotten what I've written. So
Well,
you'll
you
have to,
left it to the rest of us to gather these thoughts. And
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, so we're just so grateful to have this
Yes.
opportunity
Yes.
to meet with you and just we're recording this and would like to, I don't know, maybe do a little editing, but put it up and I don't know, share so others can gain from this, hopefully.
okay.
Yeah, and I wanted to just first, sort of just acknowledge you in your life's work. You are now, if you you are publicly saying you're 92, I think.
Three,
93.
Wow. Wow.
three. Yeah,
And you just finished your last book, this
that's right. Yeah, I
wonderful book.
can't write anymore.
It's amazing, and that's
Yeah.
partly why we're here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that just from England, fashion design, India, Jungian analyst, author of 9 books,
Mm.
and 2 websites that are incredible.
Mm.
Just a wealth of information and depth of wisdom.
Mm.
And in one of those websites, there is a quote from
Mm.
Pierre de Chardin.
Mm.
Yeah.
There is an almost sensual longing for communion with
Mm.
others with a larger vision, the immense fulfillment of the friendship between those engaged in furthering the evolution of consciousness as a quality impossible to describe.
It's such a beautiful quote. And he must have been so lonely in his life because he was persecuted by the church, told to shut up and everything,
Mm.
and probably had not friends like you. And it was got it lonely, I think, although he accomplished a tremendous amount in his life and wrote wonderfully in other books as well as the one that we know. So it is lonely until you find your path, and then you find all kinds of people on the same path whom you didn't know existed until your path got going, sort of thing.
Mhm. Mhm.
So there's so much guidance, I'm sure, that we're guided to the people we're meant to meet
Yeah.
and the people we're meant to work with. I certainly have a group around me, a very wonderful man in France called David Lorimer, who runs the Scientific and Medical Network.
Oh,
And he's been a friend for 30 years. But we never, 30 years ago, dreamed of what we would be doing now. It was just inconceivable, both for him and for me. And there are others like that. I'm sure your lives are like that, have unfolded in unexpected directions.
Yeah, definitely.
well, we're excited to step into this with you and have some companionship with you. And we
Yes.
find there's much overlap, both in your book that corresponds also to my book, which
Yes, well, I was so pleased to find your book because you'd
oh,
done the research that I hadn't had time to do, really. And it was very helpful
mm,
to find that and to find my own work confirmed with yours. So thank you for that.
really, yes.
Yeah.
And then Diana has stumbled on your book,
The messages from the Transcendent Dimension. That was your,
Yes.
yeah. So I have received messages, I mean, 30 plus years in a much more conscious way, but as a child, and then I purposely shut down for a while. When I was about 9 or 10, as when, helping to pass people over, and it got me. I got a little afraid, but we can go into that more after. But I have there's a lot of resonance there for me from with that book.
That's good. Well, there again, I was so fortunate because I had a mother who was interested in these things. If I hadn't had a mother like that, I never would have found them
Wow.
because there's no way my education would have prepared me for that, apart from the journey to India and the Far East. But I knew these messages from the age of 13, and she didn't read them all to me, just a few. But I got interested, and sort of felt that they were real communications coming from real entities. And she used to go with a friend, a French friend, to different parts of Europe, spend a few days there, and then write down, the French friend wrote them down, and my mother would type them up when they came back into their home, so to speak. So there was a very close friendship there, obviously from other lives. But so that was the foundation, and that grew because my mother was interested in the Kabbalah and all kinds of things, although she wasn't an intellectual, but she was interested, and she worked away making star maps and all sorts of things
Wow.
to do with the Kabbalah. And
Wow.
I've got all her papers still in my workroom here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What an inheritance.
What an inheritance. Yes,
A priceless inheritance.
yes, it
Yeah.
was, because without that, I would never have found the way that I have. And she took me on the first journey to India before the one that I described in the book. So she was full of energy and interest in life. That was the main thing. She absolutely loved life, and she was a poet, an artist. And I think I've inherited some of her gifts. And I've fortunately inherited my father's critical intellect, I think, which was a great help to balance all this.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's maybe a little bit of what Diana and I are doing.
What we do, yeah, together.
Sort of the cross check of academic, sort of esoteric mystery history,
Yes,
mystic.
it's good to have that. Both the
Yes.
working together too is wonderful. So
Yes.
many congratulations on having
Yeah,
found
thank
this
you.
one.
Yeah. So maybe we can just start by stepping into. We could go in any direction. It's vast here, and just how lovely the Kabbalah dovetails with the Gnostic tradition. But in the Gnostic tradition, there is this theme of Sophia, which you have delved into in your latest book in a big way. It's such a strange, somewhat lost and forgotten, overlooked theme in the
Yes.
esoteric wisdom tradition.
And
So,
it's such an
yes.
extraordinary text, that Pistis Sophia.
Oh my gosh.
It's extraordinary that that existed, and then and also at quite a late time. I think it was third century or quite late anyway. But where did it start? That's the mystery. It
Yes.
must have started at the time of Jesus and Mary Magdalene. Must have.
Yeah.
Well, I spoke with Joseph Rao at one point, who helped to translate Leloup's translation of the Mary Magdalene manuscript.
Yes.
And Joseph shared with me that that Leloup had told him that the Pistis Sophia is a later version, which makes a lot of sense.
It does make sense. Yes.
And so the copy that we have, was dug up around the 1800s, and then published, in the early 1900s, and then finally 1978 we finally got a good copy of it along with the Nag Hammadi texts. And it's such an obscure text, the Pistis Sophia, but it's the cosmology, the creation story,
Yes.
what is it that we are missing in Western culture?
Well, we're missing the divine feminine. That's the main thing.
Mhm.
Absolutely, catastrophically, because it was, as I say in my book, it was lost in 623 BCE and never recovered. And then until these scholars began delving into the Gnostic origins, so to speak, there was no knowledge of the Pistis Sophia whatsoever, and no knowledge of that extraordinary description of the transfiguration of Jesus too, which is one of the most beautiful things in the book, and which was very, very moving. So there was just so much richness that was destroyed, I'm afraid, by mainly the Emperor Theodosius I in the late 4th century. And he burnt thousands of manuscripts and thousands of texts, as well as the actual manuscripts and gospels. So that was an utter tragedy, because think what would have been recovered if that had not been destroyed. And so I think that the lack of the feminine is a theme that goes all the way through the last 2,500 years. And I used a lot of channeled material in my book with the permission of Ozark Publishing because I thought it was so important because it fills in the gaps in what we know about Mary Magdalene. And also, last night there was a marvelous lecture given by Dr. Anneen van der Meer for the
Yes.
Scientific and Medical Network. And she definitely said there was no doubt whatsoever, as a scholar, speaking as a scholar trained by Gilles Quispel, that Mary Magdalene was Mary of Bethany. And that hasn't been definitely proven, but she's proven it with the work, that huge book, which I don't know whether you have, the Mary Magdalene Unveiled.
Yes, we have it, and I've looked into it. I've scanned it, but I've not done the deep dive into it. And I know that she's looking at the the Gospel of Mary Magdalene and the Beloved Companion book as the more original version of what then became
Primary
the Gospel
text.
of
Yeah,
John.
Yeah.
Mhm.
that's right. And apparently there was, she was saying last night that there was an earlier version of the Gospel of John and then a later one towards the end of the first century
Wow.
by the same person, I think.
Huh.
Didn't quite get that. But anyway, she went through it with a minute sort of microscope, really, comparing every single sentence of the Gospel of the Beloved Companion with the Gospel of John. And it's so obvious that he did copy it, but changing God the Mother into God the Father.
Yes.
For us.
Yeah.
That,
We
that,
we I we share that that
And also cutting out the wedding at Hercana, not Cana, but Hercana,
okay.
which is near Bethany, which makes such sense. Why would Mary Magdalene or Mary Bethany gone up to Galilee to get married when she could have had the place just near her,
Right.
where she could have gone quite easily to? So there are lots of little things like that I find fascinating. And I can see how the Gospel of John has been taken as something very important because it has the scene after the resurrection where Mary and Jesus meet each other in the garden. And that could only have been written by Mary Magdalene because it wasn't written by Jesus and there was nobody else there. So it must have been written by her. And why did she have access to that? Because she was his wife. You know, it was perfectly obvious that you wouldn't get into the tomb unless you were wife, sister, or mother. So all that I find fascinating as a woman to see the heritage that has been lost and deliberately obscured by the patriarchal psyche, who obviously was frightened to death of the feminine all the way through and had to repress it. And why was it frightened? Because it was different. And it was therefore presumably a threat and something that had to be controlled and therefore, if possible, excised. So they excised Mary Magdalene, the marriage to Jesus, and everything to do with her, calling her a whore, and was only put right, I think, quite recently by one of the popes. So all that was very interesting. And again, my mother had written a book called Mary, Martha, and Lazarus in 1947, I think.
oh, wow.
Wow.
And from the Library of Congress when she was living in Washington, because my father was seconded there during the war, the end of the war. So she went to the Library of Congress and dug up all this history about Mary, Martha, and Lazarus and put it into this beautiful book of poetry she wrote, which was published by an American publisher. So that was the foundation again of my interest. Who
Wow.
were these people? And then 40, 50 years later, it all comes up again in a form which I can do something about. I could take forward her work, and also there's no doubt that we were, probably you as well, we were in the circle of Jesus at that time. There were so many, I think 172 women disciples and 172 men, which is a lot. So probably we were among those. And that's why my mother was attracted to Jesus in the first place and why she took on this work of writing the book and everything. So all that is fascinating. Once you accept the idea of reincarnation, things open up in a way that they couldn't do before. If you have a closed mind, you can't do anything.
Yeah. Yes, for sure.
Our relationship to soul level, our relationship to our ego consciousness, our
Mm.
sort of small I self, consciousness as it relates to the higher self and then the divine consciousness.
Mm.
And this is something that your Diana really, I think, exalts
Mm.
in that relationship.
Mm.
And there seems to be such a strong parallel between your experiences, Anne, and Diana's.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
I think it was just accepted that there was such a thing as divine spirit underlying everything. And that's why I like the title of your book, The Divine Spark,
Right.
because what Christianity didn't do was to teach people that they had this divine spark within them.
Right.
It taught them to believe and to worship, but it didn't speak about the divine spark within. And
Yeah.
that was absolutely vital. And so that came through the messages too, I think, generally speaking, probably yours as well, that we all carry divinity within us. And as I say in my book, we're all part of what we've been worshipping for thousands of
Right.
years.
Right.
Yes. And that's a big step to take, and many people will not be able to accept it. But
Um,
it's so obvious to me that you can't shut off the divine ground from
yeah.
what it has created
Right.
and brought forth.
You know, I have a cute story of my childhood. So I would speak to my guides or angels, and I just never thought I didn't realize that, let's say 4 years old, that other people weren't doing it. So I didn't really mention it, but then I entered Catholic school, and at 6, I remember asking the nun, how come no one talks about talking to, like you only talk about Moses talking to God. Like, what about the rest of us, and they wouldn't know what to say. So
You must have gone down like a lead balloon
I
in a
know.
Catholic school.
Yeah.
Well, and then the experience of shutting that down,
Right.
and then it going sort of like latent
Yes.
until a later time when
Right.
when it could be a little safer to bring back
Back in.
in.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah,
And,
but it's so sad that it was lost, that teaching for 2,000 years. There was no mention of it really, or except for the mystics. They knew.
Right. Right. Yeah.
well, that's where the Kabbalah is such a treasure, and their concept of Shekinah and the indwelling light, the indwelling presence, and that seems to have such a strong parallel to the Sophia and the delivery of the divine spark from the highest realms into and to the human form that is really a conduit between us and the divine.
Yes, it's very moving, that particular passage or passages, because it does show that the soul was deliberately created, as it were, or the consciousness was given to humanity probably much, much earlier than we have any idea of. Certainly, I think as early as the Paleolithic and to the shamanic tradition right the way through. And then it was lost because of the religions and the priesthoods. It was covered up. And we're now recovering it. There's so many people who are working on these things now all over the world.
Yes.
Yes.
And that is very encouraging. And also, it gives us hope that we'll get through this very difficult period that we're in now, which is a time of choice. If we don't make the right choice, we will have just thrown away what we are. And if we move into transhumanism or into being possessed by AI, that is a huge danger because people are quite gullible, particularly young people who are perhaps looking for something different. And unless they're warned, they're going to get into real trouble, I think. So that worries me. And that's why I put the 2 chapters at the end about transhumanism and really the totalitarian tendency in governments.
Mm. Yeah, one of the things that I'm observing is the I'll say kind of an attack on our empathy, our humanness, and
Yeah.
that's where I believe the divine feminine really can, be exalted is to keep speaking. So I'm using my voice, which is being guided by Sophia, to speak about this.
Yes.
Because at the same time as AI is coming up, our empathy is being eroded, and it's kind of a perfect storm.
Yeah, well, it's quite deliberate.
Yeah.
It's a deliberate plan, really, to deprive of us our finest faculties or qualities. So I think you're absolutely right to speak up, and Ian was speaking about it last night as well.
Oh, wow.
Um, just saying that we have to stay true to the heart and to the values of the heart, and above all to the empathic relationship with other people, no matter how that, even if they're coming to kill you, you keep the empathic understanding that we're all part of one unified divinity, really, which is obviously extremely difficult if you're engaged in battle or suffering from starvation or whatever. But I think that is terribly important to put the emphasis on the heart.
Yeah.
And to develop the qualities of the heart, which are understanding, empathy, solidarity with the suffering of the other, all the things really that Jesus spoke about and taught. And no doubt Mary Magdalene as well. Well, she does in the Gospel of the beloved companion, because she
Yes.
follows through with him. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's we're having a sort of a long ongoing conversation about all of this in terms of like what is our task? What is our choice here at this juncture? And excuse us, Kitty. And in terms of do we like what is our activism? What is spiritual activism at this point in time? Do we just stay in the sort of the connection with divine and really in our prayers, or how do we meet, so, for example, the rise of Christian nationalism and the wave of Christian fundamentalism that is certainly sweeping America and really threatening our ability to have this kind of a conversation.
Really? Yes, I didn't know that. Well, that's very sad. I think you have to, wherever you, like we are now, you're speaking up about the true values and to say that Christianity took a wrong path, and it took the path of power. And that's when it went wrong in the 4th century.
Yes.
And that's what Jesus warned about, the ruler of the world, which was the power principle, and also the archons, the archons of the Gnostics.
Yes.
You can see it now. It makes humanity take the wrong course for the wrong reason.
Right.
And it drives them into. I've got somebody mowing the lawn. I hope you can't hear.
We can't hear it here.
That's good. Anyway, I think, like with my book, I think in your book, you should just speak up when you feel the occasion. And you are probably teaching, both of you, in different ways.
Yes.
You're meeting like-minded people, and I think that's very important, to form small groups where you can discuss these things, become aware of the dangers of being silenced, and say at all costs we have to keep our voice and our freedom of speech. That's terribly important, which was lost during the COVID years and terribly lost in this country, but I think in yours as well. And we were completely silenced. And that was wrong. That was completely wrong. The wrong path of power again, power over. So I think we have enough intelligence, all three of us, to know what to avoid, what to cultivate in our lives, and to develop, particularly in relation to young people. The more young people one can reach, I think that's very helpful. And also to even to go into schools and talk about these things and ask questions to the children and say, what do you think about why you're here? What's brought you here? Ask the Gnostic questions. Who are you? Where have you come from? Where are we going?
Right. Beautiful. Yeah.
I don't know if you have a sense of where this whole human experiment might be headed at this point in time. Is it a choice of right, sort of left or right, or not
politically,
not politically, but
well, it is a choice.
Control or further liberation.
I think we are going definitely through a passage of choice, and astrologically that's true between two ages, Pisces and Aquarius, and we're just on the husk. Actually, we're supposed, according to the astrologers, now, just the last week or so, with the new moon, be moving into this new kind of consciousness where it's more available to people. So that is very helpful to know. And we're coming out of Kali Yuga, apparently, which has lasted a long time, in which we lost all remembrance of who we are and what we're doing here. So all that was lost. So I think that this is a tremendously important time of choice and waking up and being aware what's going on around you, but not necessarily getting involved politically because it's a waste of energy. Let other people do all the shouting and the screaming and the protesting, but just keep with your small groups and with each other. And that's what I do. I have a group of friends, as I say, I keep in touch with. I have the Scientific and Medical Network, which is a great help because there's several thousand people belong to that, and they're excellent lectures and conferences that they organize. And they're very much at the front page of what's going on. But many other people are as well, many other organizations as well. I can't at the moment think of them, but there are plenty. And all this has come up in the last 30 years or so. Certainly in our adult lifetime, it's come up because it didn't really exist 50 years ago, apart from the Theosophical Society it did exist in. But I think that certainly in my lifetime, there's been a huge change since the 80s. So that's 80, 90, 110. But the last sort of 40, 50 years, there's been a big change of consciousness already. And that can be cultivated and developed. Once people know that the power principle is the problem, if being inducted into wanting power over other people and avoiding it at all costs, that is the crucial sort of key, really, to getting through this difficult patch, not to be sucked into anything which is promoting power over other people.
Yeah.
I think that, we are involved in a variety of different spiritual communities that intersect, and which is just so heartening. And I have to say that, so your chapter on the COVID and the pandemic and is speaking to an awareness that many of us had through the course of the pandemic, where there was sort of a campaign of disinformation
and censorship,
censorship, and then it led to a sort of an increased profound distrust of mainstream medicine and the mainstream sort of status quo view of an understanding of health and the medical establishment. And so in America, what seems to have happened is that then that consciousness became intermingled with what we're seeing now as the rise of a very kind of crazy making, far right, white Christian nationalist sort of movement that is championed by our president right now. And it's very confusing because we're having a difficult time differentiating what is the misinformation from, for example, the medical establishment, from what people see as this sort of radical, extreme, sort of tear it all down and take down the deep state. But really, what's behind that movement in the administration right now is exactly what you're talking about in terms of transhumanism. There's the tech, dark enlightenment, the butterfly revolution, the Curtis Yarvin and the Musk and Thiel, and now our Vice President Vance are all involved in essentially tearing down, sort of the government in order to replace it with this who knows what. It's a
that is really terrifying, I think, because
yes.
Musk is so unbalanced and so undeveloped, really, or unconscious, if you like. So God knows where he'll take America if he gets a real handle on things. But I still think that there's the Constitution. I'm 3/4 American, and I really value that Constitution, the First Amendment, and the freedom of speech is vitally important. And I think that one should just return to that and say we're not going to be shut down. We're
Mm,
not going to be silenced like we were in the COVID years.
right.
And we're going to speak up for the values which are totally missing.
It's
Because,
being extremely challenged right now,
Yeah.
and in
mm,
terms of the courts and the executive branch. So this is a political conversation that can tend to sort of pull us down into the hardness and the unspiritual dimension of human experience. And so we're working to, okay, let's come back to
Mm,
how does spirit inform this challenge that we're in right now? How
well,
does
I
the
think that,
feminine
yeah,
inform?
well, you obviously are listening to spirit and asking what can be done. And I think it's not, I think it's important not to get embroiled actually physically with the struggle going on,
mm,
um, the Trump replacing Biden. And I do admire Kennedy for what he's doing in the medical world because there's so much corruption in
Mhm.
the medical world. And I think that medicine has lost its way because it followed the scientific materialism paradigm,
mhm,
treating the body as a machine.
mhm,
And you just inject it with so many needles and it'll be fine, sort of thing. I mean, it's so utterly against the idea that the body is sacred and
mhm,
the temple of the soul. So I think those sort of ideas could be talked about and brought back. But I do see that you're in a very difficult position because I
mm,
follow the news quite closely. And I do think it's what's happening is the eruption of Uranus or Uranus
mm,
into the melee of this situation we're in because he is both a destroyer and the creator of the new.
mm,
So at the same time, we have the chaos of the
mm,
Trumpian world, sort of thing, and the political arena. And at the same time, we have people like yourself who are working to awaken humanity, give
mm,
them the different values which were based on what we've been taught in the past from many, many different people.
mm,
And there is the conflict between the two and the energies, the different energies. One is totally ruthless and is driven by the power principle, and the other is much more feminine, what I've been writing about. It's to do with the feminine values of empathy, compassion, trust, honesty, justice,
mm,
very important justice, and really creating a different kind of civilization altogether when we are through this ghastly passage, which is difficult and is probably meant to be difficult because all the past is that we lived in the wrong way with all the wars, 4,000 years of wars. That is the pattern that we've been indoctrinated into. And it's almost impossible to break the spell of government and army or the medical world or the scientific world, break the spells which have held people entranced, really,
yeah,
for many hundreds of years with the church, for instance, and with all the political leaders who were only intent on conquest. That's the theme generally is conquest. So once you become aware of that whole pattern, which I hope I've made clear in my book, you can see what has not to be done
right.
and and avoid it and help other people to find the strength.
Mm,
Some people were shocked by those two chapters in my book. Friends of mine
I bet.
who've been
Yeah.
still taking boosters right up till a couple of months ago, and they cannot get it through their heads that the government would betray them in this way.
mm,
Yes.
It's very, very difficult to accept that you've been betrayed by what you've trusted for centuries
Mhm.
and also by science. They don't know the difference probably between true science and scientific materialism.
mm,
And they don't realize that scientific materialism is a power hungry ideology. In essence, it wanted to convert people to, like Musk, really, to that ideology where science could do what it wanted with the human species.
mm.
So all that has to be brought up into the open, looked at, and sifted through, like you've got a sieve in a way, and you
Yeah.
just have to sift this matter through it and see what's coming out
Right.
Yes.
And it's like
the other
teasing
side.
it all apart, because there's some truth here and there's some truth here. And it's,
Exactly. Yeah,
yeah,
and you
yeah.
pick the bits that seem to you to be true, And in those messages, Jesus said, I can't come until there is peace on earth. I am the man of peace. That's the last sentence, I think, of the messages in my book.
Hmm.
And we can see how far peace is from most people's minds, and the suffering, the unbelievable suffering that's caused by people who initiate wars like Putin. And even NATO have been involved in challenging Putin, and the tension between them has led to this war in Ukraine.
Right.
So one can understand Putin in some ways, one can understand NATO, but doesn't mean to say one has to approve of what either of them are doing.
Right. Right.
Diana has a really good story from Lynn Twist about the women.
Oh, yeah. So I don't know if you're familiar with Lynn Twist, but she started the Pachamama
Yes,
organization.
I do know, yes.
Okay. So she tells the story of in one of her TED Talks that she was in a forest and with a tribe, and the chief took the women out into the forest and said, "You have forgotten your when to say enough. Your job is to say when it's enough. So if the men go out to kill animals to feed everybody, you tell them when it's enough, or trees cut down, you tell them when it's enough." And I've taken that story, like Lynn Twist came back and shared it with Western women because we have forgotten our enough.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
to be fair, I think we haven't been allowed to say enough. And
That's right. We've been
respect,
completely silenced, yeah,
yes, we've been
for
silent.
centuries.
Yeah, for centuries. And then finding that voice again. So myself, I had an experience of, I'm just relating this to your thunder experience that you open your book with, that I would, the messages book, the messages from the transcendent realm, cement transcendent dimensions, that the thunder comes in and a being comes into the room. And I had an experience actually out at Sri Aurobindo has an ashram out in Lodi, California, small ashram. Not
Oh,
many
really?
people,
Yeah.
not many people know about it, but I used to go and would stay there for a weekend or something, a personal retreat. And one night I had that really strong thunder experience. It was a midnight, and I got afraid too. And
Hmm.
I heard a voice say, "She is here."
Right.
There's more to that. But I got up the next morning and I said, "Wow, how about that storm last night?" And everybody's like, "There was no storm." So I could appreciate your that interest.
Yeah. Yeah, they were startled and shocked and terrified because the door had blown open, and although there was no storm,
Right,
Wow.
right.
and lightning was flashing again, there's no storm and thunder. So it was quite an experience, and that started the whole thing. It never came again, that
Mhm.
experience, but it was just the beginning.
This was
And
your mother who had that experience?
yes, my mother, her sister-in-law, and her sister, and the French friend who did the messages. So there were four of them in
Okay.
the room.
Wow.
And
Mm.
one of them afterwards went into a trance, the French woman, and wrote down what they heard and everything.
Wow.
And that extraordinary thing saying, "Be sure of thy spirit, as I am, of being the fire, the wine and the breath of the one who is beyond the fire and foremost, beyond the fire and the light and foremost." Those extraordinary words to come out, really. So they were really shaken.
Mm.
Um,
Yes. Yes. The
Yeah.
the Divine Mother,
Yeah.
the feminine, the Holy Spirit. This is what your book
The Holy
is
Spirit, right?
really. I mean, it's amazing at 93 now. You've published this book that is really trying to land.
Mhm.
What is this?
what is the divine feminine? Yes.
Yeah.
I was emailed by a woman in France whom I had a meeting with last week who said, "I've got in my group people who say that the AI is speaking with the voice of the Holy Spirit."
Yes.
So I emailed back and I said, "The Holy Spirit will not come through AI,
Good.
no
Nice.
matter how much you wish it could."
Mm. Yeah,
And
right.
there it is. That's so in the same way that the Gospel of John steered the message of Mary Magdalene away from themes that
Mm.
were so vitally important to us into a more orthodox Christian tradition,
Yeah,
then AI seems to be enticing us with
exactly.
spiritual consciousness, spiritual reflection but is in doing so is steering us out of our own
Yes.
sort of wholesome spiritual.
You're so right, and so good to speak about that because it is very seductive.
Yes.
It's got Elon Musk absolutely entranced, and um, he'll never come out of it, I don't think. And it is because it makes people feel, well, if the Holy Spirit can speak to me in this way, that's fine. We don't need to do anything else. We just listen to what she's saying.
Mm-hmm.
The Shekinah was again one of the people through AI. It's just so ludicrous when you know the history and you know the sacredness and you know the exalted state of these great beings who are waiting to wake us up, really.
Yeah.
It's not funny, but it is funny because it's just simply ludicrous that we should be so led astray. And that would be the archons again, because it would be deluding us.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that's where, of course, the lost Gnostic tradition and the story of Sophia, Christ, and the archons is so valuable.
So valuable, yes. And I liked what the passage I found from that man, I can't remember, Raoul somebody, who said that repentance should be translated, but metanoia should be translated with the word change of consciousness, waking up sort of thing, not repentance.
Yes.
That is a mistaken word right the way through, unfortunately, in the translations. She's really crying out because she sees that she doesn't want to stay in this world as it is any longer. She doesn't want the power principle to hold her. She wants to return to the higher realms. And this is where we are now. Her cry is really what the cry of humanity is at this present moment. How can we get out of this pattern that we've become addicted to? How can we release ourselves from the spell, like the Sleeping Beauty that we've been under? So I think that's so important. That myth is important because it really gives our predicament and also the solution to it, because it shows that as the soul rises in consciousness, so the spirit descends to help it.
Yes.
To rescue it, really.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because there is a lot of talk of ascension in the communities that we are part of, but I never like to use the word without including embodiment, because bringing it down, you go up and then you keep bringing it down also in your body to meet the challenges that are happening, and also bringing the wisdom of Sophia. Sophia means wisdom, right?
Yeah.
Combining that love with the wisdom at this time is really important so that we can recognize things like AI saying, that
is the right application of wisdom. You're so right to mention that because it's so important. And that's what we've lost because there hasn't been any wisdom for several thousand years.
Right.
There's been control, there's been power, there's been subservience, there's been suffering, but no wisdom, except in the sacred texts and the teachings of the mystics, I think. So it's all a fascinating time, and we've all been born at this time because it is important that we're here, and that we're able to do something in our lives. You both are younger than I am, but even so, I can see that my life has unfolded in such a way that I could gather more intelligence, wisdom, and strength as I got older until I could reach the point where I could write that book. I couldn't have written it at 50 or even 70. I had to wait until really now.
Wow.
And to do that. And I think that's true of all our lives. It's like a great river which flows in the direction that it wants to the source, back to the source, so to speak. And once we're in the river, we're taken. We can trust that we're taken in the right direction and we're serving the right principle and we're listening to wisdom and we're blessed with the light guiding us.
This is that brings me to the mystery of Chartres, and it's interesting that on some of the images on Chartres and some of the other early Gothic cathedrals, there's that image of sort of the watery boundary, and it's and the some of the like the esoteric texts, Gnostic texts, they talk about the living waters,
Hmm.
and but also the levels. Mary Magdalene in the Beloved Companion talks about the seven branches of the tree.
Yeah. Hmm.
And there's, in the some of the other, in the Pistis Sophia, it's and in the oh boy, I'm thinking of Miguel Connor and the Gnostic conference that we went to last year, where this woman spoke of the, like, you're moving through. It's April DeConnick. That's who it is.
Mm.
She's talking about a prayer system where you go from, they would go deep into prayer, these Gnostic initiates. They would go deep into prayer, and then they would go up to the first level where they would meet the Archon, and they would have a prayer to say. It would actually be a declaration.
Hmm.
Then they'd come back, and then they go to the next level. They go to the next level and have that declaration in order to get past the the Archonic gate,
Yes.
until you finally get outside of the sort of the gated system that we're in.
Yeah, the seven levels or eight levels, like
Yeah.
Mary Magdalene did in her ascension.
Mm.
Yes.
Yeah.
But the fourth one is the crucial one in her gospel, because that's the power principle that you have to get beyond.
Mm.
Once you've got
Ah.
beyond that, it's not so difficult to get past the other ones. But there again, that is something that could be taught. What are the things that we have to overcome?
Mm.
And Anine made that clear. If I get a transcript of that talk, I think I will pass it on to you, because there is so much
Yeah.
interesting. And I think that I'll ask permission, but I'm sure I'll be allowed to do that. But because it did show what to do with the different levels,
Wow.
and how they also had chants with the sounds applying to the different levels. And when you get to the seventh, you have all the seven vowels or the songs which go together as a meditation, which is very beautiful. So that's something I didn't know. And she
So
said,
this
yeah,
is at your talk last night?
at the talk from Anine, yes.
Oh my
And
gosh, that's
yeah,
wild.
yes, it was very interesting.
Wow.
And also you would find it interesting because you have the research and the grounding to understand it,
Yeah.
Mhm.
where it's quite complicated if you haven't got any kind of grounding at all.
Mm.
There's a couple of the Gnostic texts, like the second treatise of the great Seth is one of in the Nag Hammadi library, where Christ talks about coming through the gates in disguise, so he's not detected by
Not
the
detected.
Archons.
Yeah.
And then so he can sort of penetrate the system and then come here and do his work. And then in the first chapter of Pistis Sophia, he's describing his ascension sort of experience, where he crashes up through these Acarnic gates, and they're all reeling back and going, "What? Where did this guy come from?"
Yeah.
And he just sort of threw them off, and it was part of the coming to rescue Sophia,
Mm.
and the reclamation of the divine spark in humanity. So that theme of Jesus, is very lost. It's very,
Yes.
yeah,
Jesus himself having to go through this process.
yes,
Mhm.
Anine mentioned another. She said there were two things: the treatise of the eighth and the ninth.
yes,
She
yes,
mentioned that a lot. So
yes,
I would
yes,
look. I haven't
books.
had a chance to look in the Nag Hammadi library, but I will look and see what they were saying, because apparently they were very important
Mm.
It's
to the
amazing.
Gnostics.
Yeah, the cosmology that the ancients, were navigating.
Yeah,
Magdalene was navigating. Christ was navigating.
and they knew about it, and all this we've lost. We've lost the ladder of ascent, really. Yeah.
Yes.
Mhm.
In the body, in this life, not after death.
Not after death. No, it has to be done in this life, make it more difficult. But it's not
Like,
that difficult when you can understand, and also you're led to different situations in your life where you do confront particular gate or particular
Yes.
level, and you have to face it and overcome it or go through it, really. Yeah.
maybe that's what we in America are facing right now.
I think as a collective, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, as a collective, yes. And we are in England too. We
Yeah.
have an
Yeah.
appalling government at the moment who are tearing down everything that the English people have always valued.
Oh,
Right.
oh,
And,
it's
but
crazy.
yeah, and there's a lot of turmoil really in the collective because they've thrown out one political party, which was the Conservatives. Now they've got Labour, and then there's a third coming up who's called Reform, and he's a bit of a demagogue and not
Oh,
not to be trusted.
Uh-huh.
But but
Yes.
but he's there's a struggle going on between these three parties sort of thing, and the English people are looking on absolutely
Wow.
aghast.
That
And
seems
you know what? There's a
parallel.
great
that's definitely parallel here. So it's a
it's a
world.
worldwide phenomenon, I think. And when you have also, I do stress in the book that we need to change our image of God because that's what the basic problem is, that it's
Yeah.
far too primitive and paternalistic and out of date. It's past its sell-by date, and obviously people might be offended by that. But if you can understand God as the ground of being, it doesn't have to be male or female, but both. But you don't tack on a goddess onto the god and say everything's fine now, because it won't work. We have to go beyond that into the divine ground and
Mhm.
ask it really for help and say we understand that you're much more than we thought you were, and um, not more powerful but more immanent,
Mhm.
because we've missed the immanence of God in nature. And that's why I put that beautiful quote from William Blake, everything that lives is holy,
Mhm.
in the beginning of the book, because I wanted that to be the theme of the book,
Nice.
the reiteration of the theme that everything is holy and sacred. And we've completely missed the point of nature,
Mm.
not realizing that it's part of spirit. And that's why I think the book is important because it explains at what point we got that separation
Yes.
between spirit and nature so that nature was no longer sacred. And this is what the materialists have cottoned on to because they think they can do anything they want with nature because it's unconscious, it's just dead matter.
Right. Right.
And that is a huge mistake, which I hope will be eliminated quite soon in some way or another.
Yeah, we have a looming executive order, I believe it is, that 240 million acres of protected trees are going to be allowed to be clear cut
Oh,
Federal
no.
on
lands,
federal
yeah,
lands,
including
and
sacred lands.
including,
Yeah.
yeah. And I'm hoping that people that's stark enough for people to
Mm.
wake up.
Whereabouts in America?
eh,
So the federal lands,
all
they're
across the
just
country.
it's
And
seems
why would they do that? To turn it into agricultural land?
No,
Or
they're working on allowing oil and gas companies to come in and deregulate the oil and gas companies to be able to go in and
dig wherever they
and
want?
and then also for timber. And it just has to do, we don't want to be dependent on Canadian timber, so we got our own timber. And
Oh, dear.
280 million acres actually is now
280.
on the
Okay.
docket for anybody, whatever, who's the highest bidder could come or lowest bidder could come in and, do what they want with it. And so this is part of what we're dealing with. And yes, so
I think there you do need some activism. I mean, you could get involved in
Yeah,
starting, stirring people up, saying, "Is this what we've come to? Is this what we've descended to?"
I
That we,
agree. And this is the part where I struggle with, RFK for years has been very much about the environment, but now because of the medical, which is wonderful, but he's aligned himself with an administration that is willing to do this kind of thing. So it gets very challenging to
yeah,
mix it all out, right? And I love
very,
the
very
quote that
difficult.
you had in your book, the earth is a thou, not an it.
Yeah, that's right, and that's what's been lost. And
Yeah.
it's not something that we can do what we want with because we are part of it and
Right.
we're depending on it for food. If we destroy all the forests, then we haven't got any weather that we can rely on. I
Right.
got excited a few days ago because there was something on one of the videos that I was watching about interfering with the sun to block out some of the
Sure.
sun's rays.
Yes, we're
Yes.
aware of that.
But we've raised that in Parliament now. They're
Oh,
going to
okay.
debate a thing saying we don't want interference with what's it called the
Chemtrails.
chemtrails. We
Mm.
don't want interference with the atmosphere of any kind, whether the sun or the because we every day we see chemtrails going around. So at least that's coming up for debate, and that's come from people protesting about this idea of
Mm.
interfering with the sun. And the arrogance of humanity that or people that think that they have the right
Right.
to interfere with the earth's life in order to benefit themselves. I mean, it's just ludicrous. But
Yeah.
this is how far we've fallen. We really have got into a fallen state where
Yeah.
we simply don't know what we're doing anymore. But there's no reason why people like you, both of you, can't speak up and say, this is not right, and I'm not putting up with it. I'm
Right.
going to speak out and gather your community together and your contacts and everything. And it can grow because little things can grow into bigger ones.
Yeah.
So we're just so grateful and so happy to have this conversation with you,
Yeah.
Anne. And it's so inspiring and so heartening, and that there is a multiplicity of consciousness,
Mm.
attempting to grasp the complexity
Mhm.
and find our way through and find our way
Yeah.
back.
Mhm.
And I think we should think of Chartres because that cathedral was built at a time when it was equally difficult to live.
Yes. Oh
There
my
was nothing
gosh.
but war everywhere in Europe. And then the Grail legends and the troubadours changed all that. And the building of Chartres came out of that. And it was such an extraordinary creation for that time to be able to build something like that, so magnificent and so numinous.
Mhm.
So
Mm.
I think we have to remember things like that marvelous rose window behind you
Mhm.
as inspiration,
Mhm.
Mhm.
and remember that we're walking the path of the labyrinth, but that the rose window superimposed on the labyrinth is the spiritual dimension imposed on the material one
Mm.
and
I love that.
radiating through it. So I
Mm.
think remember that in all your work, and I'm sure you'll be fine.
Mm. Thank you.
Lovely, lovely to meet you too, because
Thank you
Yes,
so
it's
so
much.
lovely to meet you too.
Yes.
Thank you.
So
okay.
So blessed.
take care.
Perhaps we'll meet again.
Well,
Yeah.
Okay.
bye bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.